I remember going through that training, and they had Vietnam videos, and they were showing what medics would do in the Vietnam era. I had to walk out of the room because some of the stuff was so gory that it made me sick. So I was like, oh, what did I get myself into? Forced myself to go back in and watch, the remainder of that stuff because I wanted to be the best medic I could be. Whether you are a corrections officer, whether you are patrol officer, it's a different kind of breed. It's a very alpha environment. And to survive in an alpha environment for, long periods of time, first and foremost, you have to have a mind frame that can get you, to the end. It's a tough job. Prison work for 27 years, there was rarely a day that went by where there wasn't multiple alarms that were going off. And alarms would mean anything from a homicide or a death or a hanging. But you don't know as you're running to that alarm, just like officers don't know when they get a call, they don't know what they're going to get when they get there. So you have to be poised, from the time you exit either, a building in the prison and you get yourself to that alarm, or you exit the car and you're walking up to, an unknown. Yeah, it's a lot of stress.
Welcome to the REimagined podcast.
All right, guys, welcome back. I got a special one here today. Over the last year, we became really good friends. Ex-military, law enforcement, medical, now entrepreneur, but great husband, great father. I got my good friend Rick Field here today. Thanks for coming.
Nico. Thanks for having me on, bud.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Looking forward to it. So, man, I just unpacked all of your previous life's history and your present and your future of entrepreneurship, but I really haven't asked. Rick, you certified me to get my CCW. You've been helping me buy, build, do all the guns and ammos, and talking about some hunts we're going to go on. But I only got a little glimpse of your early life in the military, because the gentleman actually assisting us on the CCW course was actually in the military with you, high school friend, from what I remember.
Yep.
And he was talking a little bit about that. But how did that journey start? As young Rick, how did it transition from there? Let's kind of start there.
Sure.
If you don't mind.
No worries. So graduated from Clovis High School, and just thinking about what my future was going to look like, and a little bit of a knucklehead back then. And
were you always this big?
Yeah. So I started working. I started working out when I was 14.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went from being a fat kid, and getting no attention from the girls to,
Oh, so that was your driving factor that motivated you?
That was a big motivation. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay.
And then also, sports, playing football. I wanted to be in the best shape I could be in. So I think I was about 13, 14 years old. Started getting into the gym, and just opened my mind up to the world of fitness and everything that comes along with that, just being healthy. So I'd been in the gym for a long time, and my goal, one of the things that I wanted to try to achieve, just like any other kid playing football, was I wanted to go to a D1 school, and I wanted to try to make it to the NFL, and it's such a low percentage of people that actually get to do those types of things. Along the way, I had knee surgeries. My first knee surgery, I think, I was 15 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. And, the more you heavy lift, over a lifetime, the worse your joints get, and the more issues you have. But, I've had a 350-pound bench press in high school, and, super heavy deadlift. I was part of the 2,000-pound club over at, Clovis
You still
High.
got that shirt, and I doubt it fits you now. But.
Yeah, right. It doesn't fit anymore. It's extra medium, So, yeah. But, so that was kind of, where I was back then, lifting weights, playing sports in high school, not really ready to go to college or have much of a direction of what I wanted to do in what was going to be adult life.
Yeah.
Being the son of a cop, I always thought law enforcement might be fun. So my dad was a highway patrolman for over 30 years, and a really good one too. That guy was, he was... When I talk to other people who know him, he's like, your dad was the man, and
awesome.
Still is. He still teaches, and he taught over at Fresno City Police Academy for years. But yeah, so graduated from high school and was kind of lost. Started off in junior college, and kind of wasn't for me. I wasn't ready to start studying yet, or jump into the books. So at 17 years old, I joined the Army. And initially, the guy that did the CCW class with me, we went in on the buddy system, and we were going to go MP, military police.
Yeah.
So it felt like a pretty natural thing with my dad, being a cop. So went down to the recruiter, took the ASVAB, qualified for, pretty much anything that I wanted to do. So went to sign up for MP, and they're like, hey, you got an 18-month delayed entry because they were backed up on the school, the military school that I had to go to. So I really didn't want to do a long-term investment in the military. I just wanted to go in and, kind of grow up, get some cash in my pocket, GI Bill, that type of thing. And so I went ahead and went a different direction. MP wasn't going to do it for me. I didn't want to wait 18 months just to get into the military. My mom and dad had to sign the contract with me at 17 years old, and then I had to wait till I turned 18 before I shipped out. So, yeah. So I wound up going into the medical field as a combat medic. So I went from MP to combat medic, and went to Fort Sam Houston, where I got my medical training, and it's pretty cool. A lot of combat related type stuff. I remember going through that training, and they had Vietnam videos, and they were showing what medics would do in the Vietnam era, and I had to stand up and had to walk out of the room because some of the stuff was so gory that it made me sick. So I was like, oh, what did I get myself into? I forced myself to go back in and watch, the remainder of that stuff because I wanted to be the best medic I could be. So, yeah, wound up shipping out to Korea, did a year in Korea over there at 121st Evac Hospital. I thought I was going to go over there and wind up on the DMZ, demilitarized zone, and, head out with some fellas and go do some patrols and all that kind of cool stuff. I wound up working at a hospital in the labor and delivery and newborn center. So,
no way.
Yeah.
So a different path than you expected?
Totally different path. Yeah, when they called out my first assignment, they're like, hey, you're going over to the 121st, and you get your assignment over there when you get to the hospital. So went over to the hospital, and I wanted to do, like dust offs. I wanted to fly on choppers. I wanted to be like a flight medic, that type of thing. So when they said, Field, you're going to the labor and delivery newborn nursery, I was like, what? Like, you got to be kidding me.
Just lost.
I literally thought somebody made a mistake.
Yeah.
I was a big kid. They didn't even have scrubs to fit me.
Wow.
They had to order in scrubs to fit me because I was a big boy back then. Yeah. So did a year in Korea, came back stateside, wound up going to Fort Polk, Louisiana. I was in the infantry, mechanized infantry at that point, which is, felt a little more natural for me. So, I got to do a lot of cool stuff. They would have, special forces guys come in and do training over there. And I got to go to the field with some of those guys just in a support role. And sometimes they would let me shoot, some of their high-speed stuff. And, otherwise I would just sit there and watch them train. But, it kind of sparked more of an interest in me to, get into like a special operations, type unit. But I wasn't willing to do, their 4 or 5 year commitment to go, to a Green Beret or, even a Ranger School. Ranger School didn't require that kind of commitment, but, I wanted to do something, but it wasn't time for me yet. Yeah. So did about 3 years and then got out. I got into the reserves here locally, and it was being a medic, it was another hospital unit. So they asked me if I wanted to go to nursing school. They were just starting what they call the bootstrap program, where the military would pay to put me through nursing school. So I said, sure. So it was a 2-year LVN nursing program. So I did that, and I was working part-time as a security officer over at St. Agnes Hospital. So I would work the night shift, and I would be, in a security uniform with a badge and all that kind of stuff. And then I would do nursing rotations over at St. Agnes while I was going to school. Wow. So I would take off my security uniform, I would put on my nursing uniform, and then I would go up onto the floors and I would start nursing and doing my rotations. And I had to do a rotation in labor and delivery up there. So in the middle of the night, the pregnant women would come in labor, and they would, go up to the floor to deliver. They would see me in a security uniform, and then a few hours later, I would be up there in a nursing uniform. So it kind of freaked some people out, and I had to get my instructors had to come over and be like, no, he's going through a nursing program. So yeah, it was a good experience.
It sounds like, I don't know if you're a big believer, but, God was kind of pushing you this direction of you coming as this masculine man wanting to, exert force and law. And one, I appreciate your services highly, but the world had different plans for you. It seemed like every time you wanted to push into the combat military, it was like, now we're going to go nursing, labor, delivery. So it's like kind of a calling, right?
Yeah.
What was that kind of mentally for you? Do you think like you're just like, man, why can't I get a break? Or did you start to recognize like, maybe this is what the world wants me to do?
I thought it was just a point in time,
Yeah.
a point in time that I was working through and trying to just identify opportunities. And if that's where I was in that moment, then I needed to make the best of it, and try to come out the other side with the knowledge that I needed to, to have to make it to whatever the next level was, even though I didn't know what the next level was at that point. So when I got done with nursing, the nursing school and program, I was working over at Fresno Community Hospital downtown, and I was working the psychiatric lockdown unit, which I understand is not there anymore. But I was doing a lot of stuff that was very similar to, what might occur in prisons. I was working with, people that were brought in under a 5150 and then needed to be medicated and needed to have some treatment to get them, healthy enough to go back out and live a normal life, or as normal as they can. So I was doing that, and I saw a flyer that said, come work for the Department of Corrections as a nurse and a peace officer. So it was a dual position.
Wow.
And I thought, okay.
Perfect fit.
Yeah, I thought that might be an opportunity, because I was kind of throwing around going to PA school. And at the time, I was researching how much physician's assistants were making. And it was actually very similar to what they were paying in the Department of Corrections. So I thought I'd go, work for corrections and then kind of see where the medical field takes me in the future. So got into corrections when I was 22 years old, wound up doing 27 years. But along the way, I left the nursing aspect of it, the dual position, nursing and peace officer, and started to promote through the ranks, and became a sergeant, lieutenant, captain, associate warden, and did pretty good along that route. But along the way, we had our own SWAT team called the Special Emergency Response Team. That's what it was called back then. Now it's called Crisis Response. So I wound up getting on that team, tried out for it, and the tryouts were pretty rigorous back then. Started with a 2-mile run. It was kind of a military, paramilitary, type thing. We had to run with a log, 4 of us underneath a log that weighed like 400 pounds, and you had to truck it, several hundred yards, and about every 50 yards you had to drop it, do push-ups on it, pick it back up, do sit-ups on it, pick it back up, press it over your head a certain number of times. So it kind of had that feel of, a military special operations like unit. Yeah. And then from there, we did like entry room training. It was very much hostage rescue oriented, but also, a role that you would play when, a situation was happening in an institution where regular line staff needed assistance at a higher level, a more tactical level. Yeah. So it really came out by way of Attica State Prison. The Special Emergency Response Team did, in California. Kind of started, back in the day in New York when they had a prison takeover, and they identified, who better to go in and handle a prison situation, a hostage situation, than the people that work in prisons and know prisons and can navigate prisons and understand, the type of person that you're working with and dealing with. So that's kind of how that Special Operations Unit was born, and then from there, I specialized even more in that, SWAT type program, and I went to a sniper program, and from there I went to a couple of other sniper schools. I went to Ron Fagoldi. He was one of the FBI sniper instructors. He started his own program. I went to his school. And then I went to a couple guys who were no longer Navy SEALs. It's kind of like, what do Navy SEALs do, after they leave the military? Well, a lot of them open training programs.
Before we continue, are you an attorney, CPA, financial advisor, or business professional looking to advise your client on any real estate needs? Visit REimagined.com as your main resource for expert insights and practical tips on anything real estate related. Whether you handle probates, trust administration, rental portfolio, or similar matters, REimagined.com has everything you need to succeed in the world of real estate. Visit today, hear about our one-of-a-kind offer, and see how we can best service your clients' needs.
So wound up hooking up with a couple of guys that did that when they got done with their SEAL program, and I went through their sniper school. So I became really interested in long-range shooting. really precision
What do you think that
shooting.
passion was about? You just enjoyed that the most?
Yeah, I think, of all type firearm and all different, skill sets, that's one of them that is the most difficult to master.
Yeah.
Because when you think about shooting, distances of 1,000 yards or 1,500 yards, there's variables that you have to take in consideration that, a lot of people don't know about,
Yeah.
like spin drift or the way that the earth rotates. If you're shooting
Yeah.
long enough distance, that comes
So it was
into
a challenge
factor.
for you that probably kept you more interested or motivated in it?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
it did. Right.
So where did you take that as far as, diving into more of just the sniper focus as far as jobs and application to, was that part of the SWAT?
It was part of the SWAT program.
Okay.
Yeah, I wound up becoming the sniper team squad leader for a few years.
Wow.
And then we did some competitions. I did like Sniper Week West. We did the California SWAT Championships and,
Very
that type
cool.
of stuff. So, yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of stories. Not sure you can mention a lot of them, but so this 20 years in corrections and SWAT program, did a little bit of research on that. You talk about it, and I don't know if you're open to talking about it today, but there's a huge, I don't know how to put this correctly, but like the professionals doing that, I don't think get respected enough of the mental health, the challenges they go through. Most of the outsiders, including myself, you think of these guys are just specimens, the most badass people in the world. They're tougher than nails, but they don't recognize, they're humans.
Yeah.
Right? What they're doing, putting their, lives on risk each day in and day out, and, your problems compared to life problems. I'm not here to say which ones are worse or better, but you're putting yourself in stressful situations day in and day out. You talk a little bit about that from the studies I've done. What can you say on that?
Whether you are a corrections officer, whether you are, a patrol officer, whether you are a SWAT guy, it's a different kind of breed. Mm-hmm. And, it's a very alpha environment. And just to survive in an alpha environment for, long periods of time, for 15, 20, 30 years, first and foremost, I mean, you have to have a mind frame that can get you, to the end, which is retirement. And, SWAT, you take I want to say regular officer, because officers are, they're my brothers and sisters out there. They're patrolling, they're keeping us safe. It's a tough job, whether you are, like I said, in a patrol unit, or whether you, have some type of a specialized, unit that you worked with and work for. I know a couple guys that work for Magic. Those guys are special guys too. Yes, the stress that you are under on a day in and day out basis, just in a first responder role. And then on top of that, the specialized units like SWAT or, homicide detectives. Imagine what those people go through on a, day in, day out basis. So you're exposed to a lot of stress. And I'm not going to say that, every officer throughout their career, self-medicates or, does things that, wind up in high-risk behavior, type stuff. But when you live in an adrenaline world and you are used to, being around high levels of, adrenaline surging through your body, it becomes normal. Just like any other, chemical or substance that your body is used to having on a day in and day out basis.
So you're almost talking about like a addictive nature to it, just like anything else with alcohol, adrenaline.
I'll tell you this:
tobacco.
You don't feel right, unless you you have adrenaline surging through your system. It's like, why am I not feeling normal?
Yeah.
Well, because the adrenaline's not there. So, when most people, the average person, will go through, 5, 6, maybe fight or flight situations in a lifetime. And I'm not talking cops. I'm just talking, everyday people.
Right.
Cops go through fight or flight situations, and they got to fight, by the way. You don't have an opportunity for flight.
Yeah.
Everything in your body may be telling you, get the hell out of there, get to safety. But you have to fight that back, and you have to put yourself into, that situation of not being in a safe environment, and you have to fight your way through that.
And how constant are they going through those situations?
Every day, every single day.
So you're talking, fights, stabbings, shootings,
all that. Yeah. I mean, prison work for 27 years, there was rarely a day that went by where there wasn't multiple alarms that were going off. And alarms would mean, anything from, a homicide or a death or a hanging to, a fist fight or, some other issue. But you don't know as you're running to that alarm, just like officers don't know when they get a call, to respond to a domestic violence or something like that. They don't know what they're going to get when they get there. So you have to be poised, from the time you exit either, a building in the prison and you get yourself to that alarm, or you exit the car and you're walking up to, an unknown. Yeah, it's a lot of stress.
Yeah.
And how you deal with that stress on a day in and day out basis. And, for me, there was some self-medication. For me, there was some high-risk behavior. For me, there was some alcohol use. There was a lot of gym work. There was a lot of getting in the gym, but, being a very alpha type, person and type A on top of that, the gym it's not the only thing that I needed to be healthy.
Right. It wasn't it was an outlet.
It was an outlet.
How much of an outlet is that on all the stresses you're going through is what you're saying?
Yes, exactly what I'm saying. So, I liken it to,
wait, let's pause real quick there. You had your wife is beautiful, by the way.
No,
I have
thank you.
to mention her. And then your children. At this point in the 20 plus years in corrections, you had your family as well, right?
Yeah.
So you not only you fight or flight on your personal health, but hey, I got to go home and raise kids and be a husband.
Right.
So what does that do on the mental mindset of, kind of your thought going in like.
Yeah. So there's no power down. A lot of people say, well, then drive home, power down. And for a period of time, it may work. Whether, like I said, whatever type of first responder position you're in. When you leave work, you hope that you can leave it there. But that doesn't happen. I liken it to a cell phone where, you have apps that that are open and running, right? And that those are draining the battery in your cell phone. But then how many apps are open on your phone that you're not aware of that are completely draining your battery faster than the apps that you are aware of? It's the same kind of thought process with the brain with me and the emotions was, I knew what I had in front of me and I knew what I was dealing with in those moments, but there were so many things that were going on in the background of my brain, of my emotions, and it would totally drain me at the end of the day. If I made it through the day without being drained, that was a good day.
Yeah.
Normally within a couple of hours of the shift, depending on how many issues you had to deal with, how many fires you had to put out, it was really easy to be completely drained, within a couple of hours of being at work. Yeah. And then you take that, you're already drained, you're already, emotionally affected, mentally affected, physically affected, because this stuff doesn't shut off when you get home. So you get home and then, you got to try to muster up some type of positivity for your family to be there, to be a husband, to be a dad. And the struggle was, making all that work together. Man. And I didn't always do the best at it.
Yeah, no, that's tough, man. Man, that's deep. So there's two things I want to unpack there. The reset button, right?
Yeah.
Which I want to talk about. And then second is your analogy that I just want to bring up to the audience and love is, guys, like we're like a cell phone with all these applications that are getting worse and worse as time goes on. And what I talk about within my organization and to myself and my family is being self-aware, because your phone will die if you don't close those apps out.
Absolutely.
Your body, your mind will die if you are not self-aware enough to go and exit out of all those apps.
Yep.
And there's a certain time for each of those apps, right? They're very useful. We're in 2024. Innovations are here. Technology's here.
Yep.
Take advantage of them because they may be able to help you within your job setting, whether you're an entrepreneur performing business or law enforcement, protecting and serving. There's certain things that you have to use, but then you got to turn them off. And I feel, look, it's not easy. I mean, I'm living it right now, where we were just talking before we went live, but like these, health benefits of a plunge, sauna, workouts, diets, my plunge is kind of my reset. I gave up alcohol recently, and it's just like, I'm trying to find out resets, and does it work every time? No, but you try to be self-aware to say, when I am somewhere, different from workplace, I need to physically and mentally be there.
Yes.
Right. So how can I disconnect, exit out of all those apps, and be present for my children, for my wife, for whatever is next. Right.
Yep.
And I don't have the answer for that, of the trick that's going to figure it out right away. But I do want to say that what's helped me, and I don't know if it relates to you, is being self-aware enough to understand within those days that I have a stressful deal going on, X amount of closings, funding, etc. I don't need to bring that home, but it's very difficult.
It is difficult. And, thank you for bringing up the self-aware part, because that's huge.
Yeah.
When you become more self-aware, not only of, the difference of who you need to be at work versus who you need to be at home, but how to make that transition. That was one of the most difficult parts. And so I went through a training. It was a couple of years ago. It was offered by a company named HeartMath. And, if anybody wants to know how to deal with stress and how to deal with emotions, because for 27 years, I woke up a pissed off person almost every single day. When you work in a dark environment and, you're like prison, you start to become a nature of your environment. Yeah. Absolutely. So, and it wasn't until much later in my career, when I was exposed to the HeartMath training, I began to understand how to control my own thoughts and how to control my emotions. And I didn't need to be angry all the time. I could control my anger. I can control how I felt about, a certain situation. I had to figure out what my triggers were that put me into a negative thought process. And, before I got so into the negativity, I had to bring out positive thoughts and reverse that. And I know it seems, like, oh, that's overly simplified, but it is almost just that simple. It takes practice, though. You have to rework your mind to understand that you don't have to go down an overly emotional road. You don't have to go down an angry mode. You can recognize the triggers even before they happen and start to put things in place, like shut those apps off, right? The apps that are just draining that battery, that would be overly emotional about, whatever the issue was. I don't have to be that. Yeah. I can recognize, that yes, that happened, but, I'll deal with it in a positive fashion. I'll come out of it, on a better side, one way or another, either by learning from whatever mistake was made or just being in the moment and not having to be overly emotional about it.
Yeah.
That was huge for me.
Yeah. But, I'm sure the class was great, and I'm sure you're going to highly recommend it, which I'm interested in.
Yeah.
But, this podcast, I want to be different, right? People can listen to words and be like, okay, that really clicks for me. I need to be more self-aware. I need to exit out of my apps. It's still tough, right? We're addicted to what we do. I'm addicted to work. You are addicted to law enforcement and wanting to serve.
Yes.
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with me wanting to do business and do deals, or you wanting to do law enforcement and being the best at what you do. But, what are your couple takeaways that maybe the audience can have and I can have of, we talked about a little bit of kind of figuring out those triggers, and maybe when you do figure out those triggers, of what do you do from there? So like my triggers, kids get sick because my dad died when I was young, right? My triggers are telling myself I reset when I pull up home, getting home, phone starts ringing. Then I got everything popping up, kid's voice, wife starts yelling, what are you doing? I got to close this deal. You just find excuses is what I'm getting to.
Okay.
So is it owning maybe the excuses of, owning up to what you're doing and recognizing, like, I was an angry person and this is affecting my family? Like, what truly made you want to make that difference beyond that simple course? Or was it just that course that really...
So, when I was into my career and I started to recognize that I was more of a problem for myself than what I truly thought. And by saying that, I had a thought process that other people were the reasons why I was being affected in some of the ways that I were. I was. So I would, not really blame other people, but instead of looking internally and going, well, it's the way you're communicating with people. It's the way that you're looking at, a certain topic or certain issue. You don't have to go down that road with this person, whether it be, a disciplinary issue or, I was an administrator for a long time with the prison system. And when I found out, or when I had that epiphany of it's not everybody else, it's me that needs to change. I need to be a better communicator. I need to have, focus. I need to break down, certain things and do more of a priority type, thing. And the other thing was I didn't need to identify my individual, my person, as much with the job. So I was a correctional administrator, and that was a big part of my identity. Yeah. But when I started to understand that, well, it's what I do, but it's not necessarily who I am. Who I am, there's lots of other things that I am. There's lots of other things that I like to do. The prison work gave me a means and a mechanism to live life, but it didn't need to be all encompassing.
So you were saying you're self-aware enough to recognize, again, like you already said, is your identity was in this role that you then got recognized by outside influence to really, I guess, your ego take over, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. For being honest, a lot of it does come down to ego, and wanting to be, the man, or be the alpha, and you don't need to be that. You can, a lot of it for me too was, respect and wanting people to do the job to the best of their abilities. And first and foremost, understanding that not everybody has the same skill sets and ability as the other person. So if you have an expectation and you set that expectation across the board, you better figure out how to get people to that expectation and treat them as individuals, and don't just expect that everyone's going to be able to get to that expectation in the same fashion or same way. Right. Everybody learns differently. Everybody has personal experiences that are different. So that's what I started to really focus on was, better communication skills and recognizing that I needed to do things differently. Instead of just putting down an expectation and holding people to it, and you have to meet this expectation because I told you that's what I expect of you. It was unreasonable to have that thought process. And I wanted the respect from, the people, but respect isn't something that's given, it's something that's earned. And when you take a personal approach and you get to know people and you invest in people, people will give you 100%. Or sometimes over 100%. They will work so much harder for you when you begin to treat them, in a more humane manner than I was able to do in a lot of, years, because I knew policy and I would, quote policy and I would enforce policy, but I would do it in a way that left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. Yeah. And it was, well, you're going to do your job, whether, you want to or not. You can respect me or you can fear me, but either way, and I'm not a small guy. So my stature, and I didn't realize this until, further down the road too, my stature plus, that thought process of respect me or fear me, but either way you're going to do your job, never should have had that thought process.
How long did you run with that thought process?
It was a long time, brother. It was a long time.
So you create this habit, and you probably had to work really hard to break that habit.
Yeah. And the thing is when you...
It happened overnight or...
You know what? It was there was some level of a switch going off. I just didn't know what it meant necessarily or how to deal with it. But
well, what I'm teasing on the audience is, that one recognition that you had, and maybe I need to further elaborate on. So you started with a nature of your environment, but you didn't necessarily leave your environment, did you? You recognize it. It's myself. The environment's always going to be the environment. We're always going to be in this world surrounded by other alphas or other individuals or other people trying to do deals, in my regards. It's not the nature of this. My wife teases me all the time, well, why don't you just get out of that? If it's making you this toxic person that wants to come home and drink or gives you all these stresses where you're not sleeping at night, just get out of it. It's like, well, yeah, that's the easy, cowardly answer, just to quit, which, it's always outwork, outlast, never quit.
Okay. I like that.
That's Dant Morris. He reminds me of that. Good friend of both of ours.
I can see Dant saying that. Yeah.
But it's more of just, well, it starts with me. It's not this environment. You'll never escape it if you just leave the environment that you think is. Look, and that's probably an extreme version of it. There are some environments that you do need to exit.
For sure.
Right. And you've been in law enforcement
for sure.
enough to understand that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying holistically, as far as, just an environment that you think is changing you because of that, typically what I'm taking from you is I had to become more self-aware of it starts with me.
Yeah.
And once I can fix myself, I can then fix the environment.
Absolutely, or have better impact on the environment. So if you liken it, and this is another one of those simple things that I came up with that made it more easy, because I used to travel around California, and then it kind of branched out into multiple states where I was doing stress mitigation talks. I wrote a couple power programs
based on law enforcement.
Based on law enforcement
professionals.
Yes, but it could really cross over into any environment because it was a lot of heart math, based type thought process.
So this was post law enforcement now.
No, I'm actually still in law enforcement, but I'm being given time to go and do these talks. And it was initially union based. The union had reached out, and we built the program together. The union that represents the corrections officers. Yeah. And then it kind of branched off when people would hear, what we had going on, and we were talking about stress, and we were openly talking about mental health, behavioral, type stuff, and that really wasn't happening 10 years ago when this thing kicked off.
That was because, like, in my mind, being a male, having a wife, 2 daughters, I'm not gonna show any weakness.
Yeah, no, it's definitely part of it.
Right. And do you think, when you're trying to
multiply that times 100,
that's what I was just getting to with your audience.
Yeah.
So if you're presenting to law enforcement, these are the most alpha people out there, right?
Absolutely.
And you're trying to get them to recognize, I do have anxiety. Yeah, I do have fear, and
I am stressed.
Yeah.
I do have PTSD. And to think you can go through a law enforcement career and, not be exposed to PTSD. Here's the thing is, I'm going to go back to the what I was trying to illustrate was when you look at a first responder and you compare it to like an automobile, if I'm a first responder, what type of automobile would be comparable? A sports car. Right?
Yeah.
Because your mind is constantly going, your body's constantly going. You are expected to perform
at the highest level.
At the highest level.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And you got all the adrenaline and all the cortisol and everything jumping through your body that's pushing you to excel, at that super high level. What if you have, if you go out and buy a Ferrari, you go out and buy a Corvette, and you're like, hey, I'm just going to drive this thing until the wheels fall off. I'm going to do no maintenance on it, right? I'm not going to do oil checks or oil changes. I'm not, if a light lights up, on the dashboard, I'm going to ignore it. I'm just going to keep driving this thing, right? I'm going to do no maintenance on it. How long is that car going to last you?
It's not long.
It's not going to last you long, is it? Right? So take that and go, if
why do they ignore those lights?
Because it's easier to ignore it, or it's easier than to deal with it. Because a lot of times you can either, I don't have time to deal with it. I don't have time to, go find a psychologist that I can sit down and have a conversation and kind of unwire some of my brain. I don't have time to, come out of hypervigilance. I have to stay in hypervigilance 24/7 because if I don't, then I have to get hypervigilant, right?
How'd you get them to recognize to overcome that?
Well, it was tough, and some of them would after I would do the presentation and I'd have these talks, people would come up and say, man, you were right on point. I want to talk to you.
That's how I'm feeling?
That's how I'm feeling. Yeah. That was me. They're like, everything you just said, that's me.
What do I do now?
Yeah, there was a lot of what do I do now. Yeah. And then I would, push them towards heart math, or a lot of these people I would, mentor, and I would call after the fact, and I would say, hey, let's have an additional conversation about, some of the things that we talked about after my presentation. And what I found was that the extra effort to get to, to do the maintenance, because let's face it, who likes to go into a car dealership and take their car in for maintenance and sit there for 2 or 3 hours? It's kind of the same thought process. If you already have a busy day and you are performing at such a high level, and then now you have to add something else onto that list of your to-dos, it's just taking more time out of your day. It's more things you have to focus on, right? Yep. But you have to maintain yourself in a way that will get you to the end game. And if people don't know this, there is the mortality rate for first responders is about 20 years less than the average person in public. So men live into 78, somewhere around there. Women live into, somewhere in their mid 80s. A first responder, the life expectancy for first responders is about 60 years old. Okay. So we go back to, you're a sports car. If you don't maintain yourself, if you don't maintain your mind, if you don't maintain your body, you are going to wear yourself out. Yeah. Just like if you don't maintain a sports car, you're going to wear it out. The longevity of it's not going to be there. I unfortunately have seen a lot of my brothers and sisters die. They've passed before, 60. If 60 is the average, you have people that are going to make it, less. Yeah, and make more. But at the end of the day,
you think they could have been saved?
I 100% think so. Yeah, but nobody was talking about it. So now there's a lot of people out there talking about it now.
Okay.
Holy smokes!
So it's gotten much better.
It has. Yeah, a lot of people talking about it, but
it's still a hard topic. I was golfing with a very close friend of ours.
Yeah.
And after a quick round of golf, we were just like, man, both of us needed that. But what it took is both of us to be vulnerable enough to say, dude, we're in this position.
Yep.
And we're in it together. And I would have probably just found an excuse not to go golf. I got more deals and, he's got to run his businesses. But, it's letting that guard down and really opening up because people want to help people.
Yep.
But you may not think so. Or you're too scared to ask.
Yep.
Which you probably see more common than I. When everyone asks you, hey, what's going on? How you doing? It's always crushing it, doing great.
Yeah.
Inside, we're so broken, right?
Well,
and I'm sure you feel like that. I've felt like it, where you put on this mask.
Yeah.
And you're scared to be vulnerable, but
yeah.
How are you going to get better if you're just hiding?
Right. And if you think about social media, don't we put all the best stuff on social media?
Yeah.
Most people will put, things on social media to make you look a certain way, where in all actuality, you could be crushed inside.
Yeah.
On social media, you're crushing it, but, personally, you're crushed inside.
Right.
And it's the same type thought process. You nailed it when you talked about, vulnerabilities. You have to be able to be vulnerable, but find somebody that is not going to take advantage of your vulnerability.
Right.
Because the first time you start to, break down and have a conversation and be vulnerable, if it's thrown back in your face or if it's used against you in a toxic manner, you probably won't ever go there again. No. And that's the hardest part is who do you go to, to have these conversations where you can be open and honest. And I'm thankful, because I've got friends and, we got some of the same friends.
Yeah.
And they've been, vulnerable with me, and
and it's tough, man. I mean, you nail it on the head. I forget where I listened to this, but it was in your industry specifically, you got guys with huge confidence, which you have to have.
Yep.
But I think the best and what I call as peak performers have not only very strong confidence, but humility.
That's huge too.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're a walking G.I. Joe. Like you're a specimen, right? And for me, as a close friend of you, to open up to a guy who's more alpha than I, at some point, and I think I did this early on, at least I like to say I did, it doesn't scare me to open up to you, and it's only going to help me. But, there's other people, again, like, you probably have had this throughout your lifespan. There's been friends probably you're vulnerable with that end up screwing you over. So
for sure.
What's your comments on that too? Because you're also in an industry where there's corruption.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you have to recognize who's toxic. Mm-hmm. And, I tell this people all the time is
that a gut thing or?
Well, you know who's toxic,
Yeah.
It after a few conversations and, beginning to really understand who somebody is and especially when you have, friends that are in the same circle.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff that you hear back is, hey, just be careful with that person or, those types of things. Or, you start slow and you build up with them with your confidence and your vulnerability.
Right.
And if during that process, they destroy something, whether it's a confidential issue or, then that's your indication of don't go any further.
Yeah.
Keep them kind of on the outer circle. Don't let them on the inner circle. But,
how did you build trust in people? I mean, how I envision you, correct me if I'm wrong, is, dude, I'm sure there's some gnarly stories of you kicking down doors, people telling you certain stories that aren't true. I mean, did you just know kind of the environment you were in? Like, if you're infiltrating somewhere on SWAT and getting into these stressful manners, you can't apply that same energy or thought process when you're, sitting around the fire having a little whiskeys with your friends of like, hey, I can't trust these guys.
Yeah.
How do you turn that switch on and off?
It's crazy because I've been retired for a few years now.
Yeah.
And some of the stories that I hear about me, and stuff that I supposedly did, when it comes to either a SWAT thing or, just regular line stuff, there may be like a 10% truth, but then it's been blown so far out of proportion that, it's legendary. It's become legendary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, well, it didn't even go down like that, but it's like, and I don't know if people just want to, sometimes over glorify things, for their own ego or, for their own storytelling purposes, but
let's pause real quick. So you're talking about scenarios. I want to dive into this a little bit deeper.
Sure.
So you're talking about scenarios of maybe a situation, and I don't know if you want to share one where you did something badass, but it's blown up. Like, for instance, like, I can relate. And what I'm asking you is like, I got caught up in this about 5 years ago. I had a property management company, investing company, multifamily development, brokerage, commercial ag, residential, and it feeds your ego. And like when someone would be like, oh, well, that guy just built 250 apartments or he's building subdivisions. It's like, no, that's blown out of proportion. Like, I own a small percentage of those apartments.
Right.
And that subdivision I got a partner on. But old Nico would be like, oh, that feels good. I walk in a restaurant, someone tells you, or you walk in a restaurant at, at 5 and you're, there's badass Rick, you probably just kick someone's face in. Don't mess with him. Right. So what makes you, it's really humbling coming from you of like, most people would roll with it. Yep. I'm that guy. I did that because it's a cool story, but like you said, it's blown out of proportion. And what makes you say that is what I'm interested in.
Yeah. So for me, it comes down to credibility, and wanting to be credible. And, the other thing too is, in law enforcement, you are subject to lawsuits and you're subject to, a lot of problems that can come your way if you use too much force, or if you're involved in things too often. You tend to jump on people's radars, and then you're going to be watched, and people want to know if some of the things that they're hearing about you is true. Because if it is true, then it could easily result in a lawsuit or potentially criminal charges.
Right. Let's take a quick break for those who are looking to buy or sell luxury properties. Look no further than GentileRealEstate.com. With our expertise and exclusive listings, Gentile Real Estate is your trusted partner in luxury real estate transaction. Visit our website today to explore our portfolio of exquisite properties and experience luxury living at its finest.
So for me, when I would hear some of the things that were so outlandish, that I was like, there's not only did that not happen, but if that had happened, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. And so there's the checks and balance that has to be, you can't sit there and go, oh yeah, I did all this, crazy stuff and that was me, I was that guy. Well, not only was I really not that guy, sure, I was involved in uses of force and there was some stuff that was pretty gnarly that I was involved in. But at the end of the day, those were things that were necessary and had to happen,
right.
Because of, what was unfolding in the moment.
Yeah.
But, to say that it was anything other than that, it puts my life at risk. It puts my family at risk.
Were you seeing a lot of people taking that recognition on that for the show?
Like
a show?
Yeah, there are people out there like that.
Interesting.
And I've always said at some point, they're going to get their card punched.
Yeah.
And, and if they don't, then,
That's a good way of analogy of put it in life.
Yeah.
Card punch. I like that.
Yeah. There's always some type of a check or balance that's going to come back to bite you.
Yeah.
And if you're that guy.
Because once you lose that credibility, just like that's how you answered it firstly.
Yeah.
You're gone. My grandfather taught me that.
Yeah. Yeah, once you lose the credibility, especially in law enforcement, having the ability to testify, to go into court and testify, once you've been deemed a dishonest person or a liar, you wind up on a list. And that list says that you are no longer credible as a peace officer and you can no longer testify. So at that point, where's your value?
It's gone.
It's gone. And your career and everything you worked hard for, it just, why put that stuff at risk?
Yeah, not working.
Where I'm not going to lie, sometimes, I rode the line. Sometimes I did ride the line, and, to say it could have been crossed, minimally. But to hear some of the stuff, it was like stomping on the line or way over the line.
Yeah.
And that's just not me.
Yeah.
I function at a level that, it still gives me credibility and respect in the profession that I do. And I've taken that thought process into, like your CCW classes and your firearms trainings and stuff. The stuff that I love to do and continue doing is, I don't tell stories. When people come to my CCW class, they're like,
even though they want to hear them, right?
Like, no, some people will.
I had some friends when I told you were coming on, they're like, oh, is there going to be some like sniper stories or, some, gunfires? And I'm like, look, there's way more to unpack with Rick than those stories, but that's what everyone wants to hear or watch or see.
Yeah, and the thing is you go through all this training so that if something did happen, you could respond and you could function at that level. But, thankfully, I never had to pull the trigger with somebody in my crosshairs, or, even shoot at somebody. I've always trained and I've always known that, how I would respond in a gunfight, and you train to that level. Yeah. I'd say this in every one of my CCW classes. If you're, 50%, thought process of if my gun has to come out, I can utilize it. Guess what? You probably shouldn't pull your gun out, right? And who actually knows, once that gun comes out, if you can use it? Well, if you've never been involved in that situation, you just don't know. Yeah. You may think, you may think that should be 75% of I can use my firearm, but a lot of things come into that: emotional fitness, thought process, connecting brain to trigger, proficiency with your weapon. There's a lot of things that have to play into who's going to come out on the winning side of a gunfight. Right. And, if you're not trained up for that, if you don't, check all those boxes, and I say this all the time in my CCW classes too, the good guy, the defender is always going to be working from a time deficit, because it's the bad guy that gets to make the determination on when that gun comes out, or, first, or, the actions that lead up to, a necessary use of lethal force. So if you're in a time deficit, the only way you can make up that time deficit is by being more proficient with your firearm, being more emotionally fit, knowing the laws and understanding when can it happen and when it shouldn't happen. Yeah. And the more you have to think about that in the moment, the more you increase the time deficit versus being able to react and having enough training and proficiency to be able to work through that in a quick manner, and then you decrease the time deficit. Right. So,
Is your mission in that? So now, okay, let's talk post law enforcement, right? I consider you an entrepreneur, whether you want to accept that or not, but would you say that? So, firearms dealings, I read up on the guardianship program. Mm-hmm. Are you still doing that?
No, we're not doing guardians anymore, unfortunately. Okay. Yeah, we lost our funding for that. So I had, It
sounded like a cool program.
It was a cool program. It really was. And we had some really great people, that were part of the program. And it was unfortunate when we lost the funding. And I tried to self-fund it for a little while, but you can only do that so long and expose your family to that type of, financial impact. Yeah. So, unfortunately, the Guardians isn't a thing anymore. Yeah. So
but
some of the philosophies of the Guardians
are
still out there.
Yeah. Training, certifying, all that. So what are you doing today, and what's the vision for the future? And I find this relevant to kind of conclude, because I can sit here and talk to you all day, but, I feel when I'm teaching my company, an organization, is to get educated, right? So what you just described is, within the CCW training, and I've taken your courses, multiple of them, I'm getting educated because I want to know how to use it and what the law is and when to use it. And then you have to then keep practicing, right?
Absolutely. If you only come out and shoot every 2 years when you renew your CCW, that's a problem. You probably shouldn't be carrying.
Right.
You should. I tell people when they go through my classes, this is the beginning of your training. Mm-hmm. You need to seek out additional training, whether it's coming through some of my advanced classes or whether it's just watching Active Self Protection. I'm going to give a shout out to Active Self Protection. It's a YouTube channel. Those guys are doing great things. John Correa, you're the man. Keep doing what you're doing, because you learn a lot from watching those videos.
Yeah.
It's officer-involved shootings, it's CCW shootings, it's homicides, and they break down the videos and they go over the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it's a teaching moment.
Wow.
And for every one of those videos that I've watched, and I've watched a ton of them, I gain knowledge off of that stuff, and it's stuff that I pass on to.
And you're even at this level.
Yeah, I mean,
and
so
it's kind of what we impacted in the mental health.
Yeah.
We talk about these people not wanting to take care of themselves or their body. There's a crazy statistic on LeBron James. I don't know if you've heard this. He spends over $1 million on his body a year.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously he can afford it, but this is arguably one of the greatest of all times. Michael Jordan is to me, but call it LeBron, but James, even though my brother would argue me, who spends $1 million on his body to constantly improve and get better.
Tom Brady did something
Tom Brady,
similar.
same deal. Tiger Woods, multiple coaches. Kobe Bryant, multiple coaches. Multiple investment into.
You're talking the greatest of the greats, whether they're the greatest of all time or just the greatest of the greats. You have to invest in yourself. You have to invest in that knowledge. You have to give yourself
that constant desire to get better.
The constant desire to get better. Absolutely. If you're carrying a gun in public, you have to want to be the best, proficient shooter. Understand the laws to the utmost. I really can't fathom, people that just want to get the permit to carry the gun,
right,
but not continue the training and understand fully the laws and responsibilities. It is one hell of a, responsibility to take a loaded gun out into the public.
Right.
And that's why I give the best training that I can do.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't
great,
sit there.
guys.
I don't sit there and tell war stories, because why waste people's times on my war stories when I can educate them in another manner so that they can be a more proficient CCW person.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, for the audience, say you're not interested in getting your CCW. For instance, my wife, she's not going to walk around carrying.
Yeah.
But she needs to get educated on using a gun.
Yep.
Right, or self-protection.
Mm-hmm.
Where do people start beyond just I don't think they need to take the extreme of, hey, I'm going to sign up for my CCW because Rick's here educating us today on we need to get more educated on it.
Yeah.
But where do people start? I mean, those training videos are great, but
yeah,
are there other areas?
And I got to say, you got to watch the videos that you watch on YouTube, because some of those people that are posting videos on YouTube with gun instruction, firearms instruction.
I'm saying the ones you referenced.
No, I totally, but I'm putting it out there for the listeners.
Yeah.
Please, if somebody claims to be a Navy SEAL or some type of a special operator coming out of the military, and they're doing safety violations on their own range, or just their technique is off. Not everybody who claims to be a Navy SEAL or a special operator actually was.
Yeah.
So please be careful. It starts with the mindset. You have to really want to learn. You can't be afraid of firearms. I always tell people, you're not on the business side of the firearm, you're on the operator side on the firearm, so don't be afraid of it. But a fundamentals of marksmanship class is where to start.
Yeah.
So you understand, how to grip the gun, how to push the gun out from the workbench position, how to find the front sight, how to line the sights up, what the sight picture looks like, how to do a trigger pull. It seems very basic, but I see a lot of people doing it wrong. So one of the first things that I ask every student that comes to my class, please tell me your background in handgunning. Tell me, have you been through, a class before? Have you been through a fundamentals class, or are you self-taught? Did your dad teach you? Did your uncle teach you? Did your brother teach you? And for those people, I keep an eye out, for the fundamentals of marksmanship, because some of those people have been shooting all their lives, but haven't really known the fundamentals of marksmanship. They develop bad habits, and then you have to unwork some of those bad habits so you can get them back into the proper habit.
Is this a one-day class?
It is a one-day class.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Very
the fundamentals class is actually 4 hours. It's the basis for defensive handgunning.
Yeah.
Teaching the stance and all that kind of stuff. I use the Associate hybrid stance in my world. This is the best stance for a defensive handgunning position. But so we go through all these things, and from there you can either build on it, take more classes, some of the advanced classes, or just come out and practice what you've learned at that point. Because handgunning is a perishable skill set. Just like long distance shooting, a lot of them you have to practice it and you have to want to do it.
I'd say anything in life, right?
Well,
we're on
that's
this
true.
Topic, but yeah, definitely that.
Yeah.
Anything in life you want to be good at, takes consistency of repetition.
Yeah, it comes back to the LeBron James and the Tom Brady's, and
I mean, Steph Curry's. He will not leave. He won't leave the basketball practice unless he makes 100 free throws in a row.
Wow.
Yeah, like talk about
That's dedication.
why he's the best shooter, of all time.
Yeah, true.
So let's leave with what are your plans for the future?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to stay in touch with you. You're a close friend. I'm going to get all my organization to do some courses with you. Guys, I highly recommend I'll let you plug at the end of where they can reach out to you to schedule for their companies or individuals or families to get in touch with you, whether interested in CCW or some fundamental training. But what is your goal of this just so appreciative history that you have served in your life, which I really respect and appreciate?
Thank you.
I view you now as just an honorable man. You're a great husband and father. Been to your house multiple times, so I appreciate you inviting me in your own home.
Absolutely.
And but
yours as well, and you're a great father and great husband as well.
I've been to a few of those parties.
Yeah. Yep.
But you come from this alpha background and history. Where are you at in the present moment, and what is your hopes for the future? I'm really I've never asked you that question.
Yeah. So, and I'm not going to be a doomsdayer, but if you look at the way that, society's changed and the world's changed, and specifically California's changed, a very anti-gun environment in California. Here, the thing is, and I asked this in my CCW classes as well, who takes out a bad guy with a gun? A good guy with a gun.
Yeah.
And it's not always the police. When you look at the Indiana mall shooter, that guy has some skills. Mm-hmm. He saved a lot of lives. Yeah. I'm a FEMA certified active shooter response instructor, T for law enforcement. Okay. So my passion is to teach people responsible gun ownership and gun utilization, with the understanding that this world's only getting more and more weird. There's only more and more active shooters out there. And by the way, it's not the gun's fault. It's the person's fault. Right. Let's get that out of the way 100%. Right. Okay?
Totally agree.
Because you got all these laws out there, and it's the good guys that are following the laws, and you're handcuffing a lot of the good guys to be able to respond.
That are going to save lives.
They're going to save lives. Absolutely. Yeah. You think the bad guys are the ones that are out there that, are following the laws? Oh, I can't have a high capacity magazine. I'm a bad guy. Let me just go get rid of my high capacity magazine. Oh, I can't have a ghost gun. It doesn't have a serial number on it. These bad people are not turning these guns into the police. Yeah. They're the ones that have them. At the end of the day, there needs to be responsible gun ownership, and there needs to be firearm training. If you own a gun, you need to know how to use it and how to be safe with it. Firearm safety is first and foremost. But where I see, myself going is contributing in ways that make society better and make society safer. Yeah. So, the worst scenario for me is an active shooter that takes out a lot of lives, because the only purpose in life of an active shooter in the moment where they're pulling the trigger is to commit mass murder. Right. Whether it's a ideological mass murder, type situation, or whether it's, just unselective killing, or whether it's selective killing. People are dying. Yeah. And that tears me up. Yeah. So you put a good guy in that position with a firearm who can, mitigate the loss of life. And if I can say that I had some type of, input on that on a positive way by teaching people responsible gun ownership and proficiency with their firearm, then I've achieved my goal. And another big thing for me is soft targets, like churches. I want to make churches less vulnerable. I want to harden their targets. So I go out and I do assessments at churches. I do security assessments. Wow. Yeah, and I'll write up a deficiency plan, or I'll look to see where they have security threats, and I'll try to work with them to harden their targets, either through training, through technology. Cool. Been working with Linkus. Yeah. So Linkus has the technology. Been working with Rhombus out of Sacramento. I want to throw out shouts to those guys because as far as technology is concerned, they got it going on. Yeah. So I go out and I do the assessment. I link it up with the technology people, and we take those soft targets and we harden them. So to save lives, that's really what it comes down to. And the more people I talk to about, health and fitness and all that kind of stuff, and I want to give out a shout out. Can I give a shout out?
Yeah, of course.
All right, Diego Yende with the Anti-Aging Center. That guy's phenomenal.
Yeah.
He's my guy. And anybody who's interested in, hormone replacement or just being healthy, reach out to Diego.
Yeah.
He's a good dude.
He's
so.
sharp, a good friend of mine too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So guys, Rick, thanks so much. Guys, if you you need to have Rick train you, and what he's doing for our community, for you as individuals to understand the safety of handguns and firearms. Everyone should be trained.
I appreciate that.
So, and trained by the best. So please
you.
reach out to Rick. Where can they reach you at?
So you can email me at freedom-firearms@att.net.
Okay.
And and also I do a lot of work at the Fresno Rifle Pistol Club.
Okay. Yeah, that's where you did our trainings.
I do a ton of work.
So they can go out there, get signed up.
Yep, you can go out there. They got my
Okay.
business cards up there. Reach out to the Fresno Rifle Pistol Club. Great people. They're doing great things up there.
Awesome.
Please go, patronize that group and that company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Patronize.
Yeah,
Not
I like
patronize.
that.
Patronize. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. Like, subscribe, and follow if you haven't already. And I'm sure Rick will be back on as you're changing the world, man. I
appreciate
if you're an individual or business or organization, you can truly change some lives and make it a better place. So we appreciate you.
Appreciate you, bro. Thanks for
All right,
having me
man.
on. All right.